Hey EDL 633 classmates, this is Cara Pike Inman. It's fun to see some new names in my group for this class. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what my research topic is I'm looking at traditional aged college students who choose to study abroad in a non-traditional location. So that's what my research is about. In terms of looking at some of the key issues that jumped out at me in this module's readings, the first key issue comes from Pascarella and Terenzini from Chapter 11. And in Chapter 11, they talk a lot about kind of all the different stages of while students are in college, some of the changes that happen, from one college to the other, that kind of thing. And in the section where they talk about the changes during college, they talk quite a bit about some of the skills and competencies that students gain while they're in college, and how there's increased critical thinking skills and independence from family influences, a decline in ethnocentrism, things like that. And part of what jumped out at me about this is just I feel like there's so much talk these days about how students aren't necessarily always removing themselves from family and from those influences. And given that I'm looking at students who study abroad, I would love to do a study that looks both at kind of how those skills, competencies, whatever we want to call them, or just characteristics are either gained to what extent in a traditional college experience or among students who study abroad. If students who study abroad, have greater critical thinking skills, or a greater decline in ethnocentrism, or show more independence from family influence. So I would be really curious to kind of compare a regular college experience, although they talk about how there isn't a regular college experience, but a on-campus college experience with students who participate in a study abroad experience. And then also kind of, again, looking at different locations. If a student who is someplace where they have ready access to Wi-Fi and all of that, if they maybe end up with less independence from family influences than a student who is in rural Belize, doesn't have ready access to Wi-Fi all the time, can't always talk to their family and friends back home at whim, or a student who's at a time zone that's far enough away where it's 4 a.m. at home and they can't necessarily have those types of conversations, as well as maybe look at the differences in those types of characteristic development among students who go abroad for a longer duration study abroad experience, maybe those who go for a semester, a year, if they maybe become more independent or have greater critical thinking or have a greater decline in ethnocentrism than those who study abroad for just a short period of time. So that was kind of the first key issue, some of those changes that occurred during college, and that's how it relates to my study. The second key issue, which was also from Pascarella and Terenzini, Chapter 11, looked at some of the effects between different colleges, and looking at, what were the effects at a 2-year school or an HBC or a women's college or a 4-year, and how those might be different. This section of Chapter 11 really discussed a lot of the differences in the experiences that students have between colleges, and a lot of emphasis in the discussion in this chapter was placed upon college environment. And like I mentioned, this primarily focused on 2-year versus 4-year schools, public versus private, HBCUs versus women colleges, that type of thing. And it emphasized how no matter what type of institution students were a part of, some of the things that were of the greatest importance were frequent student-faculty interaction and an emphasis on general education. Those were two of the things that were deemed to be the most important. And the reason those stood out to me is that if you've looked at educational systems in other countries, many of them don't emphasize student-faculty interaction. It's much more of a lecture-based learning environment where the faculty members up front, the students attend the lectures, take notes. It's not necessarily a discussion-based classroom or the interactive classroom environment that we often have here in the U.S. I know that's something that a lot of our international students are surprised at when they come to the U.S. and that our students are surprised about when they go abroad. And similarly, that emphasis on kind of a core general education, university college curriculum that many universities in the U.S. have is, again, almost non-existent abroad. It's very rare for an international university to have kind of any sort of general education or university studies requirements. You go in with as a business major, you take 3 years of nothing but business. You go in as a film studies major, you take 3 years of nothing but film studies. There's no, hey, take a foreign language, take a math, take a fine arts. So I would also be curious to see kind of how that plays out in an international context, since those were two of the things that were deemed to be the most important in a student's college environment. One of the other things that was a part of that chapter was that students also, the students' perception of there being an emphasis on that an institution places on diversity and multiculturalism was also really important in terms of the college environment. And so I would also be curious to kind of look at how that would play out in more of a racially homogenous study abroad destination, maybe someplace like Korea or Finland, versus someplace like London, which is the most multicultural city in the world, or even someplace like South Africa that's very multicultural and racially diverse. Even though kind of multicultural issues and racism are dealt with very differently in some place like London than it is in than it is in South Africa. So anyways, there's my 2 key issues. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving week, and I look forward to seeing you all on Saturday. Thank you.